Hold on tight. The champ is here. Mikey is raising the roof. He is loving it.
Let's be real for a second.
Let's be real. I'm excited to be real today. Mikey, Renault, explain yourself.
I don't hate Russell Wilson.
Todd hates T.Y. Hilton. I know why he likes Nick Foles. Do you know why? Because he scored 55 points against them in the championship game last year.
Running backs in Andy Reid's system is just fantasy gold mine. Sign me up there, man.
Yeah, and he's passing for 1,000 too, because his offensive weapons are shit.
Maybe. Oh my God. I can't even believe this, Eric. Todd comes out with some outlandish shit.
Come on.
But that one wins the night.
You deserve the torture of watching those games if you get them.
There's a problem with all those names. None of those guys are good.
Exactly. That's my point. That is 100% my point.
Hey. All I'm saying. Hey, I'm a very unique individual. You know, that's the.
I'm sure all the owners think so.
Oh, man. Just when I think that they're out, they pull me back in.
Well, MHA playoffs, they started. I think it's over now. End of the podcast. Is that how it goes, guys? That's it? End of season?
Yep.
Draft next? You guys want to talk some draft?
Hell no. We got some good matchups coming this weekend. Semifinal.
Yeah. I guess we have to talk about this past week, though. There were some teams that played. There were some teams that lost. And, yeah. So, thanks for tuning in to the MHA podcast for Eric Lansing, Mikey Renault, and Todd Diamond. We'll see you next time. The quickest show in the history of the MHA podcast.
Right.
Still salty.
A little bit.
Yeah, there's some salt. There's some salt in the wound for sure. We'll get into those matchups. How are you guys doing on this Wednesday evening? We couldn't do a podcast yesterday because I was working. I had some basketball games going on at Metro. And I was hoping that you guys would forget about it today, but nope, I got text messages, and so here we are. So how are you guys doing?
Fantastic. Doing good. Hey.
Splendid. Just splendid.
Oh, glad you guys are doing well. Glad you're doing well. What will we talk about on the show? Well, there was a couple of first-round matchups. A couple teams had some buys. Talk about some top performers, some worst performers. We'll tell you who's coming up playing next week. Some other teams playing. And I'll give you some news. You guys ready for some news?
To me, the most amazing thing about the news is that whatever goes on in the world, it exactly fits the number of pages that they're using in the paper that day. Interesting concept.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of news. I mean, there's some injuries happening out there, but I tried to stay relevant with what's going on. If I miss anything, you guys can tell me. 4 Raiders starters will be out against the Chargers. That game's happening on Thursday night, short week, and it's not due to COVID. It's all injuries, really. Cleveland Farrell, who's having a great year on that defensive line for the Raiders. Jonathan Abram, who's a punk, but he's a good player at points. Those guys are going to be out, and that's good if you're the Justin Herbert owner, who's going to face an already bad Raiders defense. So if you're NWA, you're probably going to play him over Kyler Murray. What is not good for the owner what is not good for NWA, who owns Justin Herbert, is that some of his offensive guys are dealing with some injuries and some questionable tags. We saw Austin Eckler, although he's probably going to play. Keenan Allen dealing with a hamstring issue. So keep an eye on that. Eaton W is dealing with a lot of injuries, which includes Keenan Allen. You got Julio Jones, who, of course, he's been injured all year. He's a chump. Dealing with a hamstring injury. Currently in a starting lineup, Chase Edmonds didn't practice today. His starting tight end, Mike Gesicki, doesn't look like he's going to be playing this week, so he'll probably roll out Gronk. Excuse me. And starting quarterback, Phillip Rivers, missed practice today, dealing with a toe injury, although he doesn't really run that much. Got a good offensive line, he'll probably play. NWA's fantasy, probably the fantasy MVP of the whole league, James Robinson, dealing with a knee issue and was limited today in practice. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
Christian McCaffrey just doesn't want to play football anymore, apparently.
He's irrelevant. He's irrelevant. He doesn't. Who cares about Christian McCaffrey? I don't care about him. His girlfriend doesn't care about him. His dad doesn't care about him. I don't care about him. So why are we even bringing him up on the show? He's useless. He doesn't mean anything. And he's not going to be playing this week either.
Okay.
Is that bitter? Does that sound a little bitter to you guys?
Just a smidge, but hey, I understand. Guaranteed like 20, 30 points every single week. Yeah, I'd be a little bitter too. Supposed to carry you to a championship, and you decided, to be a douche. So that's what it is.
Yeah. Yep. Really was the difference maker. I guess we'll get into these matchups. We'll start with my matchup just to get it out of the way. Blowout victory, 30 points. Lion Rip over the Lemonheads. You could say that Christian McCaffrey not played probably the biggest difference as Mike Davis piled in 24 points against Denver. And yeah, anything you guys want to say?
I mean, Mike Davis definitely has earned his, earned his money this year. I mean, just coming in, obviously with McCaffrey being hurt and everything like that, but yeah, Mike Davis probably the, I don't know, the waiver wire pickup of the year, maybe, just because, you were thinking, Mike Davis can come in and just, weather the storm a little bit and help and just kind of wait till McCaffrey comes back. But Mike Davis just kept on playing. He just kept going around. The last 3 weeks, 14, 9, and 24. But, when it mattered, when it counted, when he was in there, did pretty good. So good on that.
Can we get out the dough of the week already for your Washington defense?
It's not the dough of the week. I'm going to tell you why. Because even if I would have played Washington's defense and I would have played my best flex person in Robbie Anderson, I still would have lost by 1 point.
Ooh.
Points.
1 point. However, on the other side, and we'll get to that game in a moment, I think that's where the dough of the week is. But it was close. It was definitely close. I had Washington in there on Sunday morning, and I just saw how bad Drew Lock has been and how good Carolina's defense has been, and they've been coming off a bye. And I just thought, and with Washington, I figured Denver traveling over to Carolina and then Washington having to travel all the way to San Francisco. It just seemed like that was the right move. And then Drew Lock looked like Steve Young, throwing a career-high 4 touchdown passes at a career-high quarterback rating of 149.5, making all the throw. I just felt like Carolina didn't come ready to play or gave up. I knew it was bad from the beginning because they had that punt return, and Denver hasn't had a punt return in 5 years. And so that was the kind of beginning of the end there. And 1 point from the defense, and when was it 25 or 24 points from Washington's defense, who ended up having 2 touchdowns? Excuse me. So, yeah, not good. Carolina stanked it up. You hope as a Bronco fan that it gives them confidence, but I figure things will go back to normal this week against Buffalo. But what do I know? I don't know anything about that. Russell Wilson, he didn't really even I don't think he played in that final quarter.
Nope,
51 points. So, that gave me an outside chance with Allen. I picked the right quarterback. That was the thing that bothered me all week was, am I going to play the cool story of Andy Dalton against his former team? Or Mikey says that Matt Ryan would have been the best play. Allen ended up being the best play. It just still wasn't enough. And it didn't help that Beasley didn't put up big numbers. It was all Stephon Diggs. James Conner can eat a fat one. What a bust he's been all season long. Everybody, all the experts just loved him to death just because he had all these great matchups, but he's just not good. He's slow. Reminds me of David Johnson, and he's like 10 years younger. Unreal how just terrible James Conner is. And I think a lot of it, too, is the offensive line for Pittsburgh. It's good passing offensive line, but not a good running offensive line because no one really did well in there, no matter who was in there. So that's me just bitching. But, the thing that's helped Aaron outside of, obviously he's a great team. He's got a lot of good players. What did he end up having with his trio of wide receivers? 48 points. That's been his bread and butter all year, and it's worked out well for him.
Yeah.
Do you have any bit of you that is rooting for him?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Not even a little bit. No.
No,
And not just because he beat me,
None of
but
it.
we know
Like-
why.
I mean,
Absolutely.
Mikey, no. None of us want. No, none of us
I'm
want
promising a
Aaron to
steak
win.
dinner to whoever beats him. Who wants steak dinner? It's all yours.
Yeah.
But I offered that last year. No one did it, so maybe it's not worth it to try it. But
People like dynasties like
no,
back in the 90s when Cowboys were winning, or 49ers, or
who
Patriots.
likes it? Who likes it? The people that are playing them, or
Well,
the media? Who,
no, I'm just saying, you could every once in a while you could appreciate greatness, right?
NWA, they defeat the Gonzo Cats 171 to 151. That was a pretty cool matchup. As it started off in a huge favor for NWA, who got a pretty big jump on Thursday night with the Rams defense. And then also with Cam Akers, who, goodness gracious, that's what I keep saying, the team of destiny. Who would have thought to play Cam Akers? And he comes in and he puts up over 20 points. So for him to kind of jump up that high, and then next thing you know, he's got to face Derrick Henry from Gonzo Cats, and another 200-yard performance, 2 touchdowns, 35 points. Really, and I don't know if you noticed this, Miguel, but with between his 3 running backs, Henry, Chubb, and Montgomery, 80 points amongst 3 guys. And that stinks for him to have to lose. But when you play NWA, who played Herbert, he played right QB. He played Diggs, who's, I don't know if you guys know this. I don't know if Mikey saw the graphic, but he leads the NFL in receptions with 100. None of
Yeah.
us figured that was going to be the case at the beginning of the year.
No.
But I mean, Cam Akers, 20 points.
No.
Travis Kelce, again, 20 points. It's team of destiny. To
Yeah,
feel the Gonzo Cast to have 80 points between your 3 running backs is amazing. But, you know, he was telling me after, like kind of in the Sunday night game, that he should have stayed with his guns. He picked up a lot of dudes that morning. He was going to run Buffalo against Pittsburgh, and he was going to run Jared Cook against Philly, and he decided to change it up because he didn't like at least the matchups. And that probably was his downfall because he lost by 20 points. Baltimore ended up getting scored 47 or 42 points upon him in that crazy Monday night game. So he had 1 point from Baltimore's defense. Buffalo ended up having 16. So that's a difference of 15. And the difference between Cook and Jordan Reed was 8. So there's your win right there. So I hate to give it to a fellow playoff loser in Gonzo Cats, but that's unfortunate that there were guys that he probably could have had in a starting lineup and won. But yeah, I mean, it was a high scoring affair.
Yeah, like it. Yeah, I mean, and for the interesting with with Cam Akers, yeah, I think Cam Akers definitely, if he keeps doing what he's doing this year, he'll probably be the number 1 back next year. They'll probably get rid of everybody else in that. Because Mikey, what do you say all the time?
Or are you talking about the number 1 back in Los Angeles?
He's the number 1 back in Los Angeles. Because Mikey, what do you say if you have like 3 of something, you have none?
Yeah, and you say they're not a dime a dozen.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I mean Malcolm Brown ain't gonna be gone, and then they'll figure out with Henderson. But yeah, Cam Akers pretty much. Yeah, that's he earned his number 1 spot for that Rams team next year. So
anything you want to say about the matchup, Miguel?
Yeah, it's just amazing. He scored 171, and that was leaving Jonathan Taylor on the bench, who had probably his best game of the year.
Yeah.
So
yeah, John, that's another running back that's again, that probably earned his spot, for next year. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that'll be for another podcast for the end of the season or for preview. But yeah, it's some of these running backs and what they're doing now. Rookie running backs, definitely are making some noise to to be 1st round or 2nd round draft picks, because obviously Taylor and Akers weren't even drafted even near or close to any of the spots where how they're playing. So
Taylor was a pretty high draft pick though, wasn't he? I feel like, I mean, weren't you high on Taylor coming into this season too?
I was. I mean, I was just always I always get a little nervous. The fact these Wisconsin running backs, because the offensive line for Wisconsin, that's when they breed offensive linemen, and they just look so good. And then when these Wisconsin running backs come in the league and their offensive line isn't as great as they had when they were in college, I'm kind of it's double-edged sword. It's a good, like, they're talented because they can catch the football, they can do all this stuff. But if they don't have a good offensive line, because we saw this with, just going way back, he's not fantasy purposes, but Monte Ball. Monte Ball just completely, what he did in Wisconsin was great, and then he came to the NFL and didn't have that offensive line. So that's the thing with I was just going with Jonathan Taylor and even Melvin Gordon and stuff. But that's kind of the it's kind of the way I look at it to some degree.
Well, Taylor was a 4th-round pick in our draft this year.
Okay.
Cam Akers was a 5th-round pick.
Okay. So
people like those rookie running backs.
Yeah,
and kudos to NWA. I mean, a lot of people you'll draft those guys, and then a lot of those guys get dropped because you end up having to pick up someone else, and end up with someone that ends up helping you in the short term. But it's these running backs, and you talk about NWA because he's got Jonathan Taylor, he's got J.K. Dobbins who had 13 points. He's running Cam Akers who got 20 points. So kudos to him for picking those guys up if they were free agents or if I think he drafted them. He also drafted Swift, so it pays off to get those guys. And if you have them at the end of the year, it'll pay off for you.
Yeah, you gotta be patient, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll say one of the worst performers is good old Jordan Reed.
Hey, gotta love
Jordan Reed and his nonsense that continues even here in 2020. He hasn't had a good year since 2016, at least a decent year. I won't say good year, decent year. But he ended up Gonzo catch threw him in, and because he had a 10-pointer the previous week, and big two receptions, didn't even get enough yards to accumulate a 3rd point. I understand because Jared Cook is kind of up and down, and once Taysom Hill came in, he did have 10 the previous week as well, but before that he had 2 total points in the previous 4 weeks. So he was trying to go with the guy he thought would give him a better opportunity, and Jordan Reed. It makes me funny that we're still talking about him.
You're right.
There just isn't a lot there with tight ends.
Yep. This is true. What else you guys want to say about the matchup? Anything? I mean, good for NWA for picking the right quarterback. 55 points from Herbert, who had 36 completions to go along with 2 touchdowns. And then Kyler Murray, just 43 points. He had 24 completions against the Giants. So short week to decide what he wants to do with the Raiders playing on Thursday. Raiders and Chargers, I should say.
And
I would think I would stick with Herbert, given that the Raiders has just been so bad. I mean, he knows the Raiders better than anybody.
This is true. He is a big Raider fan. Arizona's got Philly at home. But, I mean, Kyler Murray, 30, 42, 43 the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, he's got Murray in there right now.
Does he really?
He does.
On my screen, he has Herbert. On my screen, he's got. Oh no, I'm looking at. Oh, obviously, because I'm looking at this past last week's matchup. But yeah, okay, there you go. So we'll see. I mean, I think he's making the right moves. I think he's the team of destiny, and I know I'm probably jinxing him by saying that, but I said that last week on the show, and he came up big.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there you go. So next week, we can talk about more about this if you guys want to keep going, but. In week 15, you have the semifinals. You have number 1 seed Cooper Cousins coming off a bye, taking on Line Rip, the defending champ. And then you have Eaton W's, who's the number 2 seed, also coming off a bye, taking on NWA. And then you have some garbage consolation bracket nonsense. But those are your 2 matchups.
A 5th place, matchup here looks pretty interesting.
Fuck that.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. What else you guys want to say about it? You guys can just go for it.
Well, both of those are going to be pretty good matchups. I mean, in the case of Aaron against Cooper's Cousins, those two teams haven't seen each other since week 2. And Kevin against NWA, those two teams haven't seen each other since week 1. So it's completely different matchups and players. It's been that long. I thought what was interesting is with Dylan's team, his quarterbacks have the same exact matchups as they had back in week 10. So he's got Kirk Cousins against Chicago, and he's got Big Ben up against Cincinnati. And that week he played Big Ben, who had like 60-something points that week, and Kirk Cousins only had like mid-40s. Right now he has Cousins in there, so I'm curious to see if he actually sticks with that.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a matchup against Chicago. But I don't know. Cousins has been better of late. Pittsburgh's been struggling, so maybe he's thinking about that. With Aaron, he's got Jeff Wilson in there for the 49ers this week, which is kind of interesting. I know Mostert is kind of hurt and questionable, so Aaron's gonna ride that against a really bad Dallas defense. So that should be interesting as well.
Well, I mean, again, his running backs were his weak point anyway, but he's been able to. I mean, wide receivers are pretty much making up for all that. So, and with eating W's, just looking at him again, the questionable tags, you take those with a grain of salt, but a lot of questionable tags next to some of these players. I mean, Julio, like I said, Keenan Allen. So, kind of interesting there. I mean, he could always put in, AJ Brown, who's actually no, that's not AJ Brown. Sorry, Antonio Brown. No, never mind. Then I was thinking it was a different Brown. But it's kind of interesting. But the kind of the matchups, you kind of have it. Obviously you have Aaron trying to see if he can go, back to back. You have, Kevin, trying to get his first championship. G, who's been in the league. Is G in the league is just as long as you guys have been in the league? Or when it started? Or?
He came along once we moved over to Florida. We were in the Florida place.
Okay.
So that'd have been probably like 2010, 2011-ish. I can look it up while we talk, but something like that. So, I mean, he's been around a little while, maybe a decade if it's 2010.
No, because that would have been, okay. I thought he was in the league way before that. I thought, okay, maybe he was, so he was in maybe the first year I was in the league. Okay.
Yeah, because I see him as Buck Nasty in 2010.
Okay.
And maybe we moved in there in 2009, but I don't think so, because I think that's when we lost I've Had Better and not all that fun. No, Buck Nasty's was there in 2009 too.
Yeah, because I remember
he was there before you.
Yeah. So okay, so it's 1 year before it. Yeah. So it and seeing G can get his get his first trophy. So it good storylines. I mean, hey, I wish we were. I said all three of us wish we were still in it, but good storylines nonetheless. For kind of the storylines of it. I mean, again, if Dylan wins the whole thing, gotta give you half of it because he drafted his team. But
look, I'm just looking for intrigue here, because if Dylan decides to go with Big Ben, he also has the Pittsburgh defense. That's a hell of a sweat that Aaron would have to have on Monday night, boy. I tell you.
Oof. Yeah,
Gosh, you worry. I mean, eating W's when his team's like right now he's got Brandon Cooks, who has kind of been up and down, even with Fuller going out. Gesicki, who is just incredible for him when he picked him up, he's probably not going to play. Edmonds, I mean, Kamara hasn't even been. I guess he had I think he had a better week last week, but with Taysom Hill, he's kind of come back down to earth. Although 16 and 20 last week is something to sniff at, but he's not putting up the 25 and 30 he was before. And Julio, there's a good chance he probably won't play. But even if he does play, you can't feel comfortable. How many times we see him go into a game and then you see him on the sidelines looking at that hamstring, trying to run it out.
Yeah. That'll be something interesting for next year going into the season with Julio. Like, Julio, I think,
That
you know,
whole
obviously
team
goes
could look different next year.
through. That's a good point. I mean, Calvin Ridley might be the only one left on that team. You know, they might trade everybody else away, so that might be something to think about. But yeah, I mean, obviously when Julio's healthy and on the field, I mean, he's one of the best. But his injuries just keep nagging him, and it's too much of a risk now. And too much kind of a risk, a little bit. To like, oh, hope he doesn't. Hope he doesn't. Is not on the sideline, like you said. But you can't bank on that. And if I was in the position, I actually wouldn't play Julio. I wouldn't play Julio. I as much as that probably that.
Well, who would you put in his place? You can't just say I wouldn't play him. You got to be able to give a solution to the problem.
I'd actually put in Marvin Jones Jr. Knowing he's on the field and Jones isn't, too injury prone and
Yeah, but you got to
volume.
understand that Stafford. There's a real good chance Stafford doesn't play this weekend.
That's true.
And if you're playing someone like NWA, you
UNR.
may go for the home run splash of what Julio can bring you.
Yeah.
I would almost throw in Antonio Brown, just given the matchup. To be honest, like, I know he hasn't been good, but this is an Atlanta team that's just been getting roasted by passing games all season long. Like, it's worth just put me in the position where it's like Antonio Brown or Marvin Jones Jr. if Julio doesn't play. Like, I rather take a shot at that dart, than Marvin Jones Jr. because at least Brown in that matchup has a chance to break out, I would think, versus Marvin Jones, who chances of him throwing up a 20 are like limited, especially if Chase Daniel is the quarterback.
Yeah, if Stafford play, I feel a little more inclined because Tennessee's defense hasn't been great.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, I don't think you can. I'd rather play Cooks at that point because Cooks has had some good weeks and he'll still get some targets and some attention without Fuller there.
Well,
that's on the road against Indy, and that's tough.
Right, I'm just saying he already has Cooks in there as his flex. So.
True. I was just thinking out loud about wide receivers. Yeah, good point. But at that point, I mean, I was just looking at wide receivers. I mean, he picked up Matt Breida today. I don't know how much that's going to help, but I mean, and Giovanni Bernard's kind of been hurt, and they're playing Pittsburgh, so yeah, that's.
I'm kind of surprised that NWA has Dobbins in there right now over Josh Jacobs and James Robinson.
Yeah, well, I saw today Robinson. Like I think I mentioned the news. He's dealing with an injury now. I mean, it's a knee, and there's still time until Sunday at 11. So there's a chance he could put him back in. He may be just doing it in case, but yeah, I don't know the situation of Jacobs. And I mean, he had 8 points. He had 13 carries last week.
Yeah, I mean, that's your first round pick.
But,
I mean,
yeah,
Jake Dobbins is like they use everybody over there. They use the Gus Bus and they use Mark Ingram and Lamar runs. Like that's chancy. I mean, I know that it's
juicy.
But could you, like, if he lost because one of those other two guys that's sitting on his bench that he's been riding all year, like, blows up versus J.K. Dobbins? I mean, that would be a tough one to sleep on after that.
Yeah, Mike, there's a good point there.
He's got some good numbers the last couple of weeks, but yeah, I mean, he knows Jacobs better than we do. He watches him more closely, and maybe he knows he's not right. I don't know his reasoning 100%, but I mean, he's been making the right moves all year. I mean, he put Taylor in when I thought he was crazy, and he ended up going off. So that was a couple weeks ago, not last week. But
I can't argue. He's been pushing all the right buttons.
Yeah, for sure. And just for the owners to know, in case they do listen, there's games Saturday. A couple games Saturday. So don't wait until Sunday to make some of your decisions. Make sure if you have anybody in for a Saturday game, like, NWA is going to play Diggs, especially against Denver. Just make sure that you guys have your Saturday games in there as well, because there's 2 of them. But yeah, that's all I got. Anybody else got anything?
No, I mean, I'm just looking forward to both of these matchups, see who's going to fight it out for that title.
Yeah.
Any way you slice it, it's going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just get to the draft already? Like, who cares? Who really cares?
You wanna just-
Aaron's gonna win. And it's gonna suck, and my life's gonna be hell. And I
We're
just,
the top 4 teams all year. It's well deserved.
it is true. That I will give you credit for. I mean, even looking at my team really didn't stack up that well without McCaffrey. So, I mean, like, there are the 4 best teams, and you can't be upset about that. You want the best of the best in there, and I'm wishing most of them the best of luck this weekend.
Yeah.
We know who I don't. All right.
Yeah, right. And,
Any last words, gentlemen, or should we get out of here?
well, me and Mikey battle it out for consolation supremacy.
Anyway, thanks for tuning in to the MHA podcast. For Mikey Renault, Todd Diamond, and myself, Eric Lansing, we'll see you next time on the MHA podcast.